So welcome to the webinar, Mastering Your Emotions. I really appreciate you putting aside the time, joining me for this informative piece. I certainly intend to enhance and enlighten your well-being with my knowledge around emotional well-being and what we can do from a holistic point of view to help you be in the best space in terms of mastering your emotions. So for those that don't know me, I know there's a couple that have joined that do know me, but for those that don't, I'm Anthony Hartcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. I'm just advancing my slides here. There we go. So a little bit about me. In terms of my qualifications, I have a degree in nutrition and dietetic medicine, another degree in complementary medicine, another degree in chemical engineering. And furthermore, I've been doing lots of study under the DiMartini Institute. And what I'm sharing tonight is majority from what I've learned at the DiMartini Institute. It's really opened and expanded my knowledge around the mind, essentially. And that's what we're talking about tonight. And this is my family here on the left. As you can see, there's my beautiful wife, Adriana, my daughter, Sophia, in the middle, and my little boy, Ollie, at the back. So they're watching TV as we speak and relaxing for the evening. What I'd love to start with is what you want to get out of this session. So it's really important for me to give you value, and you've obviously come here to gain something. Obviously, one of them is knowledge about emotions and how to master them. But is there anything particular you'd like me to touch on and to help you with? I'd love you to share in the chat function. So just put in the chat as to what you'd love me to cover. Okay, so Amy shared learning to be not so reactive in the moment. Absolutely, we're going to be covering that. Brad shared emotional regulation, and that's exactly, we're going to be certainly covering that. Rhiannon shared mainly the emotional management. Absolutely. Yep. So you'll certainly walk away with some key takeaways. I hope you got some a pen and paper as well, because there are some activities that you can voluntarily do in your own space. However, there's no obligation to do them, of course, but to get the most out of this webinar, I certainly encourage you to grab a pen and paper or type notes on your phone. But yeah, certainly it's going to be, there's some activities to do as we move along. So thanks for sharing as to what you wanted to get out. I'll move on with the show. So certainly what I'm going to provide is understanding of emotions, what they are, how they serve us, when they are a disservice, and I'm sure that's what you're very interested in. You're certainly aware of probably the serving benefits, but the disservice is, or when they are a disservice, you're probably very aware of that as well. But I'm certainly going to share the rationale behind that as to why and what you can do about it, and then learn strategies to stay centered, composed, and in control. So that's certainly that emotional regulation piece, emotional management, and also staying in control in the moment without overreacting. So, and I'm going to bundle this up in a holistic way. So that's what I preach, is holistic health. And so I'm going to share that in a holistic way. So we're going to be touching on other aspects of health and well-being other than just the mind, but the majority will be on the mind. And I'm notorious for going over time. So I'll, if you need to go right on the hour, then please do so. It is recorded and you'll be able to watch the rest of it later. But I am someone that loves giving away and sharing knowledge. So let's start with the definition as to what emotions are. So emotions are a complex physiological state that involves three distinct components: the subjective experience. So everyone, when we have an event, you're probably aware of this, an event happens, but people can perceive that event differently based on their prior experiences. And so hence why it's a subjective read on that event. As you've probably each aware, we all went through COVID, but some of us got through COVID easier than others. And again, it was the same event, but we had a different reaction or experience to it. This subjective experience will result in a physiological response. So it will drive the sympathetic nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system, depending what the event is and how we perceive that event and what label we put to that event. And then thirdly is that behavioral, which you're well aware, whether we're expressing ourselves in anger, frustration, we're happy, joyful, we're sorrow, we're sad, depending on what the event is and how we've perceived it, will result in our end behavioral action. So in terms of what I would like you to walk away with in terms of what the emotions are, is they're telling us where we have an imbalanced mind, we have an imbalanced perception of the event. The event's the event, and our perception, and our perception is only what we can pick up through our senses. And so our senses can only pick up so much, but there's the unknown factor that we don't know. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is discovering that unknown factor so we can see the event objectively as opposed to subjectively. And objectively viewing the event, you see the whole event. There's not a missing part of information. Whereas if we're just perceiving events through our senses, then there's missing information. We can only perceive what we can physically feel, hear, see, taste. So it's all through our senses, but there's always that unknown factor. And you can probably relate to this in terms of, you may have judged something. So this typically happens when we make a judgment. We've taken a perception and we judge it as either, just say you've judged an event as good, and then you've realized down the track that it wasn't so great because you've got the other parts of the missing information. And what I'm teaching tonight, or sharing tonight, is some tools at which you can get that and take it in the moment, as opposed to down the track. So instead of carrying the emotional baggage for years, you'll be able to neutralize the event at that point in time and not allow it to weigh on you, to have that gravitronic weight, that carrying, that burden. And it's that what we call emotional baggage. So I don't want you to have emotional baggage. So tonight we're going to be talking about strategies to actually dissolve that emotional baggage. We want to be free of it. We essentially want to live in a world of love and gratitude. And we can only live in a world of love and gratitude is if we perceive things as they are. And that's seeing both sides of it. So every human being has two sides. Every argument has two sides. And this is what tonight's talk about, is seeing events for what they are objectively, as opposed to a subjective bias and labeling that event. That labeling, that judgment, carries a charge to that event. That charge is stored in the hippocampus, and it will come back to you when your senses pick up something similar. So, for example, just say you had a really bad breakup, whether it be with a girlfriend or boyfriend, and they wore a particular type of deodorant, and you've got absolute resent and distaste for this person. You never want to see them in your life again. You probably know, you're probably already picturing someone like that that's come into your life, and you never want anything to do with them. But that distinctive deodorant that they used to wear, the person you walk past on the street, even though it's not the person that you despise, distaste, resent, they will remind you and trigger that emotion. And then you'll be fueled with, if it's anger, you'll just feel angry. And it was just because you smelt someone else's deodorant that was the same as your ex. And so this is how these charges build up and accumulate over a lifetime. And then we're walking down the street and we can't work out why we're so triggered. Why I've just walked past this person and they're reminding me of, such and such. And it's because we're carrying that baggage of such and such, and we haven't dissolved that baggage. And so what I'm sharing tonight is essentially some tools at which you can start working on yourself and start dissolving some of this emotional baggage that you may be carrying with you. And the issue is, as it builds up over time, it becomes noise in the brain. And essentially, we can't think clearly. We're always reacting to everything. We just, and we think, where's that come from? Why did I react like that? And it's because of all this stored emotional baggage in the hippocampus that has charge, that has valency, and we've never seen both sides of it. But the reason why it keeps popping up, it's because it's wanting us, the universe is wanting us to see the truth, the actual truth, and see both sides of every human being. And when we see both sides of every human being, we can only love them. It's unconditional love. And we can only have gratitude for how they came into our lives and for how they served us, because we see the whole. We're not seeing a biased, subjective point of view. So the next point here is your ratio of perception will determine the degree of imbalance, and it will determine how strong that charge is in storage. So, for example, if you had that same breakup, but it wasn't as charged, so you weren't as emotional, you're sort of thinking, well, I was going to break up with them anyway, and it was good timing. I'm glad they did it, or they initiated, or whatever. And it's not too, you've got some distaste there, but it's not as, I just want to kill them, or I just want to, I just want them. I never want to see them again. That is really charged. That all or never, that never want to see them again. But if if it's not highly charged, then if you went past that same person in the street that was wearing the same deodorant, then it's not going to have the same feel in the body in terms of that working up the emotions. And so that's what I mean by here, the ratio of perception. So the amount of negative compared to positive. So if it's really charged, there's lots of negative things that you can remember about that person, and you're storing all that negative, and you can only remember a few positive. That distortion between, lots of negative, very little positive, the larger that gap is, the stronger the charge and the effect it's going to have on your physiology, and the stronger the response in terms of rage. So that's probably just, and the bottom point here is really important. The emotions age us. Okay. So really charged emotions and that black and white thinking, like that all or nothing thinking, has been correlated with cancer. And with emotions, because they occupy space and time, that expands as we grow older, and that is constantly aging our body, because it's an imbalance in our body that we're taking through with us as we continue along in our life. Okay. If we don't dissolve it, we're essentially going to age quicker than if we resolved it. We'll have better autonomics. We want a balanced autonomic system. I mentioned that sympathetic system, which is that automatic fight, flight, or freeze. And you've probably heard of the parasympathetic system, which is the rest and digest. What we want is a balanced system, so that we're right in the middle and we can react as appropriately when needed. So, for example, when you need to digest food, that's when you can enact the parasympathetic system. But if you're thinking about that ex-boyfriend as you're eating, your sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, your digestive system is down-regulated, and you will bloat. So these symptoms that you experience when you eat can be because of emotional charges, emotional baggage in the brain. Thanks, Amy G. Thanks for sharing that. So keep using the chat function. I will look at it, and would love the session to be interactive. So Amy G says she certainly doesn't want her body to age prematurely. So yes, we may spend so much time with our skin health, yet what are we doing around our emotional health, which will age our skin so much quicker? Probably not the rate at which sun damage will, the sun radiation, but it will be at a really fast rate. So you can tell people that are very emotional. You'll see them when they later on in life, they look like they've been battered. And I don't want that to be any of you. Hence, let me share how we can dissolve that emotional baggage. I need to give this background, and so just bear with me here. So I don't want it to be too technical, but it is important for you to grasp the concept. Okay, so when I say a stimulus, so a stimulus is that body deodorant that you smell that stimulates the nose, your smell sense, and then that initiates a reception so on our cells. So the nose cells pick up the smell, and then that initiates a perception to our brain. So we will either pick it up and just, oh, that smells nice, that, I like that smell, or you'll pick it up and think, oh, that's terrible, that smells like my ex-boyfriend, as I mentioned before. And again, then the amount of associations with that smell will be linked at that point in time. So if you've got lots of negative associations with a particular smell, or it could be music that you listen to, you may have negative associations with certain music, or it could be positive associations. Again, I'm not just talking negative tonight. Extreme positives, again, don't serve us because they are also emotional baggage. Extreme positive events, what will happen is that we'll live in the past and we won't be present. We won't be able to live our lives because we'll think, I just want it to be like the good old days. Remember the good old days, the good old days, good old days. That is when you've got stored positive emotions from the past, okay? We want to be present. We want to be completely present with the people we're with our family members, with our friends. We want to be fully there for them. We don't want to be, back in the past or imagining what a better future could look like, with our imagination. We want to be right here in the here and now. So essentially, as you develop stronger connections and do more of this neutralizing, this is where you'll move up the brain. So essentially, this perception happens at the lowest part of the brain. This is the animal part of the brain, which I'm going to show shortly. But then the conception and the apperception happens at higher levels, higher parts of the brain. So you just think of the lower part of the brain is really, it's around our, behind our jaw, essentially. That's the lower part of the brain. That's the reptilian part of the brain, the animal part of the brain. And when we're allowing our emotions to run us, we're animals, complete animals. Okay. We just want, we want to eat that, whatever, that prey, that's something we want, whatever it is. It could be someone you love, infatuate over, or it could be essentially resentment, which you're running away from the predator. So the prey is something we want. The predator is something we don't want. And that's what the reptilian brain does. It forms a judgment very quickly to either run away from that predator or to run towards the prey and to capture the prey. That's our survival mechanism. And the problem today is we're not thinking much above our reptilian or animal part of the brain. We're not utilizing this whole larger, beyond, the back of the jaw all the way up is what makes us human beings. So anyway, let me get into how we can change that. So just in terms of the reptilian part of the brain is referred to the limbic system. You may have heard of the limbic system, which is the emotional center. It contains what is called an amygdala. An amygdala is only almond size. It's almond size and it's running us, okay? There's two of them and they're only the size of an almond and they're actually running us. So if your day is run emotionally, if you're running on emotional fuel, just reacting to everything, you are in your animal part of the brain. You're in that fight, fright, or freeze. You're very emotionally charged. You make irrational decisions. because there's no objectiveness towards what you're taking in. It's purely subjective. It generally is black and white. It's either, yes, I want that, or no, I don't want that. You know, what you don't want is the predator. What you do want is the prey. And it's that pain or pleasure seeking. So if you're constantly chasing pleasure, and these are addictions, right? So this is why we become addicted. It's our animal part of the brain. It's wiring. It's so hardwired that we're not coming out of this animal part of the brain into this evolved part of the brain and using the capacity that we have to have a life of love and gratitude, essentially, and live a life of inspiration, a life that we want to live, as opposed to being run by our animal part of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex, which is, the front part, and this larger part, not the hind part, behind the back of the jaw part, it's what we refer to is the executive center. It's where we make rational decisions. We have objectivity. It's where we have visionary. We actually can have a vision of what we want, how we're going to get it, and what we need to do each day. It's where we're strategic planning. We're looking at the pros, but we're also weighing up the cons, and we can make decisions objectively as opposed to subjectively. We've got higher problem-solving capability. We're more composed and centered, and we have gratitude and love. It's only in the higher part of the brain, in the prefrontal cortex, where we can actually have gratitude and love, because that's where we're seeing the world objectively for what it is, as opposed to what we wish it was or what we would like it to be. That's an illusion. That's the imagination. But when you can see things for as they are, the whole person, and you can love the whole person, and this includes yourself. There's parts of us that we disown, that we're not owning, and hence why we can't love ourselves. So let's get into what we can do about it. Again, this is just a diagram showing where each of the parts of the brain I've just mentioned are. So the prefrontal cortex, you can see my cursor moving over this part of the brain. It's much larger than the amygdala, which is the almond-sized part. So don't let the almond-sized part control you. Again, it feeds and feeds to the hippocampus. So this is where we store our charges. And from a primitive sense, this was important. So if you were in the wild and you walked around a certain rock in a certain area, and behind that rock was a tiger, then hence that's charging you. It's a life-threatening. You've got a massive charge. It's all negative, and there's no positive about that. And your body responds appropriately. It runs in the opposite direction. So that's animal thinking, right? But next time when you're walking around in the wild and you come into this area where there's a rock, you'll straight away remember, oh, there was a tiger behind that rock last time. And straight away you start pedaling backwards before it becomes a threat. So it's a protective mechanism for us. But you think about it, in our lives, we are not threatened every second of every day. We're lucky to be threatened in a lifetime, but we're allowing this part of the brain to run us. So let me give it an example. So this emotional eating is a classic example of living in the limbic system, or the reptilian part of the brain. So essentially this dog's looking at this hamburger, and this could be us, right? So we could be looking at this hamburger. And again, what thoughts? Exactly, Mohit. There is fewer tigers now, which is probably very sad in actual fact, but there is, and we live in very built-up areas and well away from jungles. So, looking at this burger's either making you hungry, and you're now wanting to eat that burger. Okay, so you're seeing more positives than negatives to eating that burger in this moment, right? But the longer we sit and look at this burger, we can start looking at it objectively. And then we can start measuring that against whether it's taking you towards what you're wanting to achieve around your health, or does it take you away? And so you can start to develop some objectivity by just pausing, by looking at this photo of this hamburger and seeing it for what it is. It's just a hamburger. It's not good or bad. Again, labeling food is terrible because it polarizes us. It's charging, again, our limbic system and making us go, having this massive desire towards pleasurable foods and a distaste away from foods that we don't, and then if we're in our amygdala, we're being charged up by our partner or our friend or whatever, we then want to, so they've caused us pain. We then think, okay, I want pleasure now. And then you go and have an ice cream, okay? And then you go from one end of the pendulum to the other end. And then at that other end of the pendulum, okay, you're thinking, oh, this tastes good. But then afterwards, you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That doesn't really, it's not taking me towards my goal of weight loss, for example. And then you start having regrets. So what happens? It swings back the other end. You start sabotaging yourself. You start resenting yourself. You start disliking and distasting yourself. And then you start feeling really bad. And so what do? You then go and seek pleasure. Then you go and have a chocolate bar. So I think you can start to see this emotional swing seesaw based on that subjective perception of something that is just a hamburger. But we can swing from either side, good or bad, prey or predator, happy or sad. We're happy when we're eating it, and then we're most likely sad afterwards because you're thinking, well, no, I didn't need those extra calories. Yeah. And then you're at the same time, you're feeling stuffed, right? You've eaten excess, and then you're thinking, well, that's it. I'm going to starve myself tomorrow. Again, it's animal thinking. It's all or nothing. It's just swinging from one emotion to another. And then, I've got this last point here, you start to justify why you deserve to have that hamburger. And so then you eat the hamburger and then you feel that guilt and shame afterwards. So this is where we're run by our amygdala, and we're run by the animal part, the reptilian part of the brain. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what can you do about this, or what can I do about this? And that's exactly where we're going from here. So first of all, we need to shift our perspective of how we see these events, okay? So essentially, when an emotion happens, what you want to think is, okay, there's an imbalance, okay? I've put a bias to what I've perceived. I've weighted that bias and it's emotionally charging me. Okay, there's an imbalance. I've only seen one side of what I've observed. So just say someone could have said something to you that you didn't like, okay, but you've either had a past association with what that person has said to you, and then that's creating you to feel imbalanced, and hence you haven't balanced that previous judgment that you formed. Or you could have just taken what this person said well out of context, because you were in a stress state before receiving this part of information. So what I want you to take away, certainly if there's one thing you take away from this webinar, is see your emotions as a feedback mechanism to say you're imbalanced. You have an imbalanced perspective. You've got a subjective bias to either the positive or the negative. And that you need to then neutralize that to get objectivity, and then to see the gratitude in it or the love in it. Okay, how can you do that? The first thing we start with is reflective awareness. Okay, so we often, when we are judging someone, we're judging them for something about them, whether it be a trait, some physical trait on them, or an action or inaction, that we are disowning ourselves. Okay, the reason why we're seeing it is because we are not owning it, that it's something that we do. So I want you to, and you can start this as an exercise, right? So is there and you can start with an admiration for someone. So you could admire someone. And again, I haven't spoken much about admiration or infatuation about someone, but that also occupies space and time and noise in our brain and takes us away from being present. So if you absolutely frothing at the mouth over this girl or boy, and you absolutely desire them, you want them, you just think they're the best thing since sliced bread, okay, that charge, because you're only seeing all the positive, but everyone has both sides, okay? So you're not seeing the whole person. You're only seeing one side of that person. Eventually, as you go along in that relationship, you'll start to see both sides, and then you'll start to develop a bit of distaste or dislike. It's because you started with the wrong, that's not the right term, wrong. You started with a subjective bias about that person, okay? I don't want to label things wrong or, wrong, right, bad, good, because that is a subjective bias, okay? We want to see things for as they are. So you could start with someone you admire, and what you admire about them, I want you to then reflect within you and see where you have that. It doesn't have to be the exact form they have it in. You will have it within you in some other form. So if you, okay, I'll give you an example. So you infatuate over this person because they're so disciplined around exercise. You're just thinking, I wish I could be so disciplined like them. But you have that discipline aspect with you, but it's probably in an area that's more important to you. And so, yes, you should own that trait. And so this is called owning the trait of the great. So it's actually owning. So you want to be owning these parts that you admire in people and see them within you. And then you can start loving yourself and unconditionally, and loving all of you, the whole of you, as opposed to only loving half of you. It's the same as people we resent. We're resenting something in them that we don't like in us, or we're not owning. Okay, we're not owning in us. We're not accepting that's part of us. So you might perceive a person as doing something to someone else that you've perceived as being mean. Okay, and you're thinking, oh, that person always does these mean things to, their little kid. They're always so mean to that little kid. Okay, now I want you to reflect on a time when you've been mean. We all have both sides. I have I'm putting on a inspired side tonight that you see me so into this topic, and you're probably thinking, Anthony, please move on. The time's ticking away here. But it's because I want to help you, essentially. And so, you might be getting, feeling that inspiration from me. But I also have another side to me where, yes, I'm not always nice, or I'm not, and I'm not always mean. I'm sometimes nice and sometimes mean. And so that's really important that you observe that, yes, you have both sides of you. You cannot be, it's humanly impossible to be always nice. Humanly impossible to be always nice. We have times at which we're mean, or we're cruel, or we're not kind. So it's essentially having that reflective awareness, and rather than judging that person, seeing how you can love yourself from what you're seeing in them, because what you see in them is a reflection. Okay, it's pointing back to you to say there's something that you're not owning within you, whether it be an admired trait or a trait that you resent, or an action or inaction. So this activity is really helpful. So if you keep labeling someone, or if you keep judging something for something they're doing, I want you to reflect right now, and reflect at it go to a moment where and when you were doing exactly that behavior. Okay, and you'll find that moment, and then you'll think, okay, yes, I've done that before. And And now I want you to think of another moment where you did it, and you'll keep thinking of these moments after moments. And then you think, okay, I own that trait. I do it. I'm a human just as much as they are. And you'll start to be able to own you and to love you for who you are. And it's the same with traits. So there's, physical traits that you'll admire in others. They're within you, but in a different form. Okay. So for example, you might love this person's ass and you might think, I love it because it's so toned. But there's somewhere in you, there's the same, but in a different form, trait in you. You might have a really toned shoulder or calf muscle or something. There's something that you're not recognizing within you that is just equivalent in a sense, but it's in a different form. And so we need to start to see what we're, in terms of what we're, judging in the world, we need to own within us. And then we can love ourselves for who we are and be able to radiate that love. So that's an exercise that I want you to do, and you can do it after this webinar. But certainly, if you're going through the day judging people for something about them, I want you to do that self-reflection, to think, okay, when and where have I done this? Okay, and note it down, and then think of another time, and then you'll start to neutralize that judgment, and you'll start to think, okay, I do it just as much as they do. And what we're trying to do is just balance it out, because at the moment you think they do it more, more often or a lot of the time, and you're judging them for that. What you want to do is then get enough times when you've done it in your life to then neutralize it. We don't want to take it beyond so that you feel shameful. We don't want you to feel shameful. That's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to neutralize that judgment so that you see it objectively and don't have a subjective bias. Okay, this will help you love yourself and to accept you for who you are, because that's the reflection you're constantly running into. What you're disowning in you is what you keep running into when you're out and about, or when you're watching TV, or when you're doing whatever. The reason why it keeps popping up is because you haven't owned it within you. Okay, the moment you own all these things that you're judging others by and see it within you, you'll love yourself, and you will have no judgment for them, and you'll be able to love them for who they are and see them as a complete human, and they have both sides. No human is one-sided. Okay, so that was the exercise in terms of self-reflection. So when you're judging someone, or you could be judging yourself, okay, then you want to balance that judgment by looking for other forms in your body or another action that so you might not like the way you constantly, I don't know, there's probably some action that you're doing. I'm trying to think of an action that you might be verbally criticizing someone the way they're doing something, and you just don't like how you just keep verbally criticizing that person, right? So then you want to think about the times where you're verbally praised that individual. Okay, and the more you think about it, the more you'll find the times that you have, you'll find more times that you have praised them, until you can get that level of judgment in you balanced. Okay, we're just trying to balance it. Okay, so this next exercise is that dissolving the pride and shame. So again, this is okay. So you're observing someone else, and you're judging them. So we're not doing the self-reflection. So we're not owning, we're not looking to own that trait within us. We're now looking or seeing where that trait is within us so that we can love the whole of us. We're now looking at that person, and we either have some resentment towards them, or we've got a massive infatuation towards them, right? About something that they do or they don't do, that you either like or dislike about them. And now what you're doing in this exercise is now thinking about a time where they've done the opposite. Okay, so if it's something you dislike about them, when have you observed that person doing something that's the opposite to what they're doing? So it's now balancing that you've now seen them do the opposite. So it's now bringing them up to a level. Again, that neutralization is where we're looking at to get it objective. Oh, sorry, I've skipped into the next slide. I should have read this slide first. Okay, so I've covered, anyway, what I've just covered is what's in the next slide, but I'll go through this one and explain it properly. Okay, so what you're doing, this person has either, it's someone that's either done something to you or they haven't done something to you. So, you've got a dislike for that or a like for that. And so essentially, if they've I'll take the verbal criticism. So someone's verbally criticized you and you've disliked that, right? But now we're going to look at that verbal criticism towards you in a different perspective. Okay, we're not looking at it from a subjective bias perspective. We're looking at that verbal criticism as to how it's served you. Okay, so it's then thinking, well, okay, they verbally criticized me in this moment about this. So it could have been the way you're cooking dinner, right? You got some verbal criticism about the way you were cooking dinner. So you're taking yourself in that moment where you're getting that moment of perception, where you're perceiving that verbal criticism from that person. And you're then, what you're thinking is, what you're seeking to find is how that served you. So that they could have been verbally criticizing you for the way you're handling something that was hot. And then you just took it as verbal criticism and thinking, oh, you're criticizing me again. You're always criticizing me. That's how you reacted in that time. But in order to neutralize that moment, what you want to be thinking is, how did that verbal criticism serve you? Now, it could have served you in the way that it made you think more about how you pick up things that are hot. Were you doing it in a way that was unsafe, essentially? And hence, that's what they were trying to get across, but you didn't see it at the time. You just saw it as verbal criticism. But hey, ever since they mentioned or they verbally criticized me for the way I handle hot products out of the oven, I now use mitts and I make sure they're fully in, and I make sure I use both hands to pick up the item. And so that has served you from being injured in the future. So you have a look at these events and how they've served you from that moment until today. And you start seeing these connections as to, hey, okay, I haven't burnt myself ever since that person gave me that verbal criticism. I used to always burn myself before that. But ever since that event, I'm now much more cautious and I haven't actually burnt. And so then you see what they did at that moment. And you can only see it with gratitude because you see the whole of what unfolded. At that moment, you are only aware of the criticism based on, maybe that was historically as a kid, you're always criticized and you're so alert to criticism, and you just you're not listening to what they're saying. You're just taking it as, oh, they're criticizing or putting me down. But this person was trying to do it and they obviously, you misperceive them. And so what you can do is now go back to all these parts of, you know, this person, what they've done to you. Like they've verbally criticized me here. They didn't do this for me. You know, they weren't there to pick me up. Okay. For example, they weren't there to pick me up, or, you know, like in terms of, you know, or they let me, you know, they let me down. They weren't, you know, we said we'll meet at this time and they weren't there. So, or they're late or something like that. And so in this instance, you're now looking at how that has served you from that point to today. And you're finding enough examples of how it served you, enough connections in the brain to then say, okay, I can see that was complete done out of gratitude. There was no malice or no ill intent. It was completely, it served me. So this is really, and again, you can do this on yourself. So if you're extremely shameful for something that you've done, then you can look at what you did and how it's served, how it, you know, if it's something you did to someone else, well, then you can look at how it's served them in you doing what you did. Okay, so this one was the one I started talking about before when I was on the wrong slide. So this is that all or nothing thinking. So you're thinking this person is always criticizing me. They always criticize me. They always verbally criticize me all the time. Okay, and this is that really charged, you know, because you're just seeing such a black and white perspective of this person, and they're always criticizing me. So this is the exercise where you then go to a moment where that individual did the opposite of. So what's the opposite of criticism? It's praise. So go to the moment where that person was praising you. And then you think, okay, yeah, I remember that. I was in the kitchen. It was back, 2 years ago, and they were praising me for the way I was cooking dinner. And I think, okay, yeah, okay. And then you go, but then if you still feel charged about it, then you've got to find another instance where they did the opposite, and that was praise you. So then you're thinking, okay, you need to really think back as to the interactions you had with this person and another time where they've praised you. And you're thinking back and you're thinking, oh, that's right. It was when I thought ahead and I got dinner on early, and they came home and they, gave me a massive, oh, thank you so much. I was running late and I was a bit worried about dinner and feeding the kids, and thank you so much, and you're amazing. You're the best and all that. So the thing is, what this is all about is just balancing that all or nothing opinion or judgment you have on that person. And you're now looking for the balance of, because you've taken a subjective bias on that person and you're thinking they only do this. Now what you're doing is balancing that with, I can see the opposite now, and I can see them so that they're level. Again, we're just trying to get these so they're level. We're not trying to get them so that, no, they praise me more than they criticize me. Then it's out of balance again. So it's essentially just finding enough examples to where you feel aha moments. So essentially, when it's neutralized, you will feel a catharsis. Essentially, you will have a tear of gratitude because you have seen the whole of that event. Or you can see the benefit of how that action that person did at the time you saw as extremely bad, you can now see how it served you and how it's been it's served you well, and that you can only be, and to a point where you want to go back and thank that person and think, remember that time where you did this to me? I just want to thank you for that. That is such a profound impact on my life. And that's to the point. That's to the point that is now neutralized. Okay, you're no longer charged over it. You can only see gratitude for what they did or they didn't do. Okay, so this is where we're taking it. We're just taking it to the neutral point. Again, homework. The other thing that is also driving us away from being present is our imagination of fantasies and nightmares. Okay, so when we're in pain, for example, again, we're perceiving pain. I think James must have lost. He wants to come back in. Yeah. So again, when we're in our imaginations, so we're either run by our past events or we're running by our imagination, and we're not purely present. And when we're not purely present, we're aging. We're essentially creating space and time, and we're generating emotions, and that's causing an imbalance. Physiologically, it's causing an imbalance. So we want to dissolve our fantasies and nightmares. So our nightmares will be around things that we want, but because we then perceive a loss of them, we then create a nightmare around that loss. Excuse me, that was a bit of early dinner that's digesting. So essentially so when you infatuate over someone, so that person that you just think, I just want them so bad and just can't stop thinking about them. And as I said before, you're just thinking about all the positives and you haven't seen the person as a whole. You actually haven't seen them as a human being. But what you will then do is start to fear the loss of that person. Is that person is then going to leave you, and then you create a nightmare over that, right? Okay, so this is a nightmare created over this person leaving you. Or when we're extremely, in perceived pain or suffering, we will then fantasize as to how we'd like it. So, for example, COVID, when you're locked down, you're probably having fantasies over being on the Bahamas or, traveling or being the way it used to be. You might have fantasized over the way it used to be. Okay. And you weren't living the moment. You were in this fantasy of, I just want it back to where it used to be. Okay. And that would have sent emotions because you would have been then frustrated. Okay. So that because you wanted no lockdown and you wanted it the way it used to be, you then had this, emotion of frustration or anger. And this is why we had a lot of emotions expressed during COVID, because we were very much operating out of that reptilian fight, flight, or freeze survival part of the brain. And we created these fantasies, and we just wanted it to be over, and we weren't present at that time, and we were angry and extremely frustrated. And as you know, when you're suffering, the time seems to take longer. So those 6-week lockdowns or whatever they were probably felt like a year. Whereas if you were in the moment, that you wouldn't have been stretching out time. Okay. So in terms of dissolving these nightmares and fantasies, so if, like, for example, let's take that infatuation over that person, whether it be, someone that you're just wildly infatuated over, and you're constantly thinking about them, and you now have a nightmare of them leaving you or leaving your life. They're going to go overseas. Okay. This is the nightmare. So essentially what we're looking at is how that nightmare will serve us. So we're looking at the opposite. So we're thinking, okay, that person now goes overseas. How is that going to be of service to me, an advantage to me? Because at the moment, you're only seeing all positive about that person, and therefore a massive perceived loss if that person leaves you. However, what we want to do, again, is neutralize that. We want to then think, okay, the nightmare is that they go overseas and I won't see them again. And I'll be extremely sad. Well, I don't want you to be sad. So what I want you to do is then start thinking about all the advantages to the point that they're neutralized. And so one of the advantages is, okay, they go overseas. I'll be able to spend more time with my girlfriends. I'll be more present with my girlfriends. I'll be able to see my family again. I'll be more present with my family. I'll be able to deliver work projects quicker, as opposed to constantly being preoccupied with this man or woman in my life, in my mind, and taking like 5 hours to do a 1 hour task. And so you start to weigh up all these advantages of this person leaving, to the point where you want it neutralized. You don't want then it to be a complete fantasy. Yeah, I just want them to leave my life. Okay. So you're not trying to take a nightmare into a fantasy. You're just trying to then get it to a point where you're thinking, aha, okay. If that happens, it happens. Okay. It's whatever's best for them. Okay. You're not then, and then therefore your interactions with this person that you infatuate over are so much better, because you're no longer perceiving this loss of them. You're no longer, smothering them and sending them text messages and constantly calling them. You're actually allowing a relationship to evolve, as opposed to this smothering and mind you, all that smothering activity might actually drive them away. So you actually might be doing yourself a service by dissolving that nightmare you have about them leaving your life. Again, we could fantasize over someone we hate getting out of our life. Okay. Wouldn't life be so great if that neighbor would just move? Oh, life would be so good. And this is constantly, every time you hear their voice, you just fantasize about them moving. Okay. And then that's driving emotions through your body. Again, that's creating imbalances. That's creating physiology. It can create some sort of symptom. It may give you a headache. It may give you, you may get diarrhea. It can drive a physiological response. And so whilst that, what we then want to do is dissolve that fantasy, is thinking, okay, you want them to leave. Okay, what's the advantages, or how it's going to serve you by them staying? Okay, so by them staying, them staying, well, oh, that's right, they mow the front part of the yard, or our common area. Oh yeah, so if they move, that might not be done. Okay, so now you're starting to balance it again. You're starting to dissolve this fantasy of just wanting them out of your life. You're starting to think, okay, I can live with it being as it is. And that's to the point you want to get it to, is where you see it as no longer a fantasy. It is what it is. Okay, so that's a few activities that I've taken you through. The activities are still rolling. I've now hit the hour mark, so I'm going to keep going. If you're willing to stay on, please do. I'd love to keep sharing you some tips that can serve you in your life. If you need to go, please do so. I'll share the recording, so there will be, I'll send the recording to you. Let's take a little break here, and I'd love for you to put in the chat function if you have any questions at this point. Happy to answer any questions. See this as a bit of a intermission for those that are joining. I can have this intermission. Those that are leaving, this is just a time where you can do a Q&A essentially. Okay, so Brad shared, what about when they're constant triggers and your emotions are constantly, your emotions are being continuously tested? Okay, so Brad, I can relate to what you're saying there, and it means that there's essentially a whole shopping list, or a dirty washing list, or dirty washing basket of all these charges. So what I want you to do, Brad, I want you to go through and list the most emotionally charged ones, the actions, inactions, or traits that this person, so is it someone that's doing it to you? What is when they're constant triggers or emotions being continued? Okay, so I think you want to break that down into what are the ones that keep popping up. Okay, so this is where you want to create the awareness around the triggers. So what is the trigger? Okay, so identify the trigger. If it's someone else triggering you, then identify what is it particularly, what action are they doing towards you that you dislike, despise. And then I want you to look at, first of all, owning that action within you. So making sure you're owning that disowned part that may be disowned, because essentially what we repress will keep being expressed, or what we resist will keep persisting. So essentially, if there's something that you're resisting owning, then it will keep persisting in your life. So this is a worthwhile exercise to do, Brad, is really start to identify all these triggers from the ones that most emotionally charge you. That's where you're going to get the biggest return on investment in terms of time spent. We'll be getting those most charged emotions. What's triggering it? What action, inaction, or trait? And then neutralizing it. Absolutely neutralizing it using. So if it's something, if it's like going way back into time, then it's looking at how that's served you from that point till today, how that event has served you in your highest values, in your 7 areas of life. So that's how you want to assess it. Like, so how has it helped you in your career? So if that person criticized me for the way I handled the food out of the oven, it could have aided my career, because I might be in a dangerous occupation where safety is first and foremost. And so it's made my safety conscious higher. I'm more consciously aware of my safety and my personal protective equipment. And so that's one thing, how that event back then has served you in your occupation, in your work. How has it served you in your family life? Well, maybe now you're sharing with your family members that, hey, you should be handling that with mitts and not just using your T-shirt to pull that out of the oven, for example. You might be passing on that awareness to others and helping your family, serving your family. So essentially, Brad, it's just creating that long list. It's going with the ones that are emotionally most charged about, and then dissolving them one by one. So, and dissolving them, as I said, if it's, for example, if you're, it could be that person always doesn't put their washing in the washing basket. I'm just taking trivial things, right? But these trivial things add up to some people. So now it's essentially, if you're doing that always and never about that person, about that judgment, then you want to then thinking, okay, well, when have they put it in the basket? And you'll start to think, okay, well, yeah, they must have this time, because I didn't have to pick it off the floor. It must have been in the basket. So somehow it got in the basket. They must have done it. Or then you can thinking, okay, well, when haven't I put something in the dirty washing basket? So then you're owning it. So again, you start working through these exercises, start neutralizing it, and start bringing it into balance. And you'll start to dissolve these one by one. You have to work line by line. So essentially, this is the work I do with my clients, is we go through the whole dirty washing basket, the ones that are most emotionally charged, and we dissolve that event to the point that they get catharsis, which is that tear of gratitude. They can only see gratitude for what that person done at that moment in time. And then we just go through knocking off each line item. And essentially that person feels a massive weight off their shoulder. They will feel so relieved. And essentially those triggers those events have been dissolved, neutralized. So there's no, so if they now come across that trigger, they're no longer triggered. So that person's criticizing me. I'm now neutral to that criticism. And now I'm now listening more to the words they're saying, as opposed to just seeing it as criticism. I'm now thinking, okay, so what are they trying to get across? Okay, they said this, this, and this. Ah, did you mean that you would like me to do this, or did you mean you wanted me to do that? Can you just be a bit more clearer? And you respond back in a calm tone. That person will then calm down. They're thinking, okay, they're listening to me. Okay, this could be your wife, and they're thinking, oh, they're listening to me finally. And then you'll start to have this coherent conversation where you actually get the understanding the meaning of what they're trying to tell you, as opposed to just judging it as just another form of criticism. Oh, my wife always criticizing, my wife is always putting me down, or my husband is just always at me, he's always saying I'm no good at this, no good at that. Again, you need to start dissolving these events by the most emotionally charged ones to the least charged. And then next time that person is doing the same thing, you're going to respond in a complete way. But what I find with my clients, and what I found with myself, so I've done this work on myself, is that when you change, it's incredible the change you see in them. Okay. It is absolutely phenomenal. So you actually don't need to do anything about them. You just need to work on yourself, and you will see the change in them. Okay. Because you're seeing what you didn't see before. You're now seeing them as who they are, as opposed to judging them for what you had a subjective bias about them. So I hope that helps, Brad. But if it doesn't, I'm offering at the end, there's an offer for a half price session, and we can do one of these sessions together, and you'll get a better idea of how to do it. And essentially in that session, what I'm doing is empowering you on how to do it, so that you can go away and keep working on it, keep dissolving these charges. So it's a great tool to have. I mean, I still use it in my daily life. And when I come across something that sort of irritated me, I'm thinking, okay, I've been triggered. Why am I triggered? What is it that I'm not owning in myself? Or what is it that I'm not seeing in them? And you start that objective thinking process, and you start to do it, as opposed to, allow many years go by and lots of aging as we allow time to go past. You'll eventually see the objectiveness, or you'll start to see the hidden order in what they did. But that over that period of time, you've aged. You don't want that. You want to be relieved of this emotional baggage straight away. So I hope that helps, Brad. But certainly, happy to, I've also got a complimentary discovery session that you can, find out more about how I can help you. Or I'm also running a workshop at the beginning of next year, which is essentially a mind-body workshop, where we're actually doing these exercises, a full day of just working in groups on these exercises, and I'll be facilitating that. Okay, so let's move on. I'll continue. So this exercise is something that I want you to do this because, oh, fantastic, Brad. I'll pass on that information. So this next exercise is really important. So essentially, when we're living a life of inspiration, we essentially living a life of love and gratitude. And the reason why we don't is that we're subordinating ourselves to other authorities. So we're taking on their values. So, and it could be your parents have told you, okay, so, I'll give you my personal example. I was told that, there's only 3 professions that, you should pursue that are worthy, and that's doctor, that's lawyer, and that's engineer. I ended up an engineer. Okay. I did engineering for 15 years, and that aged me. So hence my wrinkles. Okay. But now I'm doing something that is truly inspiring to me. And this is what we're getting into, is living a life by your values. So I have a really strong value about health, my own personal health and the health of others. So the reason why I could talk all night, and I'll better wrap this up shortly, is because I'm just in, I'm actually in the moment. I'm totally present. I really enjoying parting on my knowledge, and I don't notice the time. I hope you're not noticing the time as well, but I certainly don't notice the time. And you will have these things that you do where you're just doing, and the time just, you think, geez, the day's finished. Okay, what the hell? That was, like, and that's essentially, you're doing something that's, you're inspired and you're totally present with it, and time just sort of just goes, and it's like tonight. So essentially, this next exercise is what we're going to look is things that inspire you. So what fills you with energy? When do you feel full of energy? When you're unstoppable? Like at the moment, I'm unstoppable. I literally could go all night doing this. What are you doing? And I want you to start thinking about, what is it that you're doing? Or start thinking about the activities, the areas that you're into, that you just think, I feel so energized. So just write them down. I just want you to write down those things that fill you with energy. What are you doing when you're filled with energy? And I've got this next point: when sleep is an inconvenience, when you think, I could just do this all night. Like I just said, I don't need to sleep. I feel so alert. And it's that thing that you just jump out of bed for. Like, you don't need an alarm. You actually, the snooze button, you just don't need it. You just jump out of bed. You just want to do it. So start thinking about these sort of things that really inspire you. There's another slide here, which I'll go to. So I've covered the first two on this slide, but as I mentioned, when time seems to fly by, what are you doing? Think about it. I want you to think about it. I want you to write it down. What do you love talking about? So what is it when the conversation goes to this topic that you then just talk and talk and talk and talk, and they just can't stop you. They just think, wow, this person knows so much about this subject, or this person just loves this subject. They just got such an inspiration for this subject matter. What is it that you just love talking about? You continuously just want to, you could talk about it all day, like I am. What is it that you love to spend your money on? So you have, it's just something that you just think so worthy of my money. What is it that you love spending your money on that's just so worthy of it? So for me, it's my health, or I'll spend myself, like I've just done an extensive, expenditure with the DeMartini Institute. I dropped over 10 or more $1,000. But that is money well spent for me, because I'm empowering myself in knowledge that I can then empower others in a space that I love being in. So where do you love parting with your money, where it's an absolute, you've got no hesitation, you think it's a complete investment? And where are you most disciplined, reliable? Where's your work, like your space, so organized? Or it could be your filing system. Like it could be, for example, you love what it could be. It could be, I don't know, you could be into investing money, something like that. You love studying the share market, and hence you got all these files. You got this file on this company that you're studying, and it's all methodically. You can access the information very clear. It's very organized. So where are you most organized, most disciplined? So essentially, you need no motivation. Nothing needs to motivate you. So people don't need to pay you. Like, I'm not being paid for this webinar, for example. So, like, what is it that essentially you absolutely have there's no external motivation. All the motivation is within. That's what you want to start be thinking about, those activities. Okay, so that's essentially, you're starting to form what's important to you. What do you value? And essentially, what you want to do is align your life to those values so that you're just living by those values. Okay, so Brad's sharing LinkedIn and social selling. So he's like, and for me, I don't like that. So for me, it's best to delegate to Brad. So this is something where I'm thinking, geez, I'm going to ring up Brad and I'm going to think, Brad, you love doing this. I don't like doing it. I'm not inspired. I can't do it. It's actually, I procrastinate because I don't enjoy it. It's not important to me. The only reason I do it is because I link it to my highest values. So my highest values is empowering and enlightening the well-being of others. So that's what I want to do. And that's what I'm doing right now. So when I post something, I'm thinking, okay, is that empowering the well-being of others? Yeah, it's aligned to my values. And therefore I have no trouble doing that post. But I don't like social media. Brad likes it. Okay. So this is where Brad needs to start working more on this space and actually start, because this is inspiring him. So now he can start strategic planning around this and then setting himself up so that he can earn a living from doing what he's inspired by. Again, so for example, I'm taking Brad, I'm not picking on you, Brad, it's just that you're active in the chat function. So for example, if someone asked Brad to say, look, I want you to do like, it could be, I'm trying to think of an example here. We'll say, I know, Brad, you must value health, but just say you didn't value health. And then someone's saying, oh, let's go to this health weekend where we learn how to get control of our emotions and we get to, be able to dissolve our emotional baggage. And, you're thinking, oh, do I really? Do I have to? But it's your partner or something, and you're doing it for them. But you're not going to enjoy yourself, are you? You're going to go along and you're just going to absolutely not enjoy yourself there. And you'd much rather be doing what you love, which is on socials, really engaging on the platforms and mastering the platforms. That's what really inspires you. Whereas you're on a health weekend and you don't value health, then you're just going to be uninspired. You're not going to enjoy it. It's just going to drag out. It's just going to be such a chore. So this is when we got to start saying, no, thank you. Okay. This is when we start to, say, look, no, thank you. I've got, other things, I've got other priorities, or just be honest, because at the end of the day, you won't enjoy yourself. They won't enjoy your company either because you're not enjoying yourself. They want to be with people that are also inspired by what they're doing. So again, don't live by other people's values, live by your own. And then don't judge others by your values, okay? Because everyone has a unique set of values. So for example, I mentioned my health. The health of others is another value of mine, and then my family. Okay. And that's where I spend all my time, just doing, doing those things. And but I don't then impose health on my extended family, for example. I'm not saying, oh, you should be eating this. You shouldn't eat that. I don't do that. That's imposing my value onto them. And I don't want that because they have a completely unique set of values. They're not inspired by my values. We might have some values that are overlap, but I have a complete unique blueprint of my values. So you have a complete unique blueprint of your values. You may have some overlap and complement others. Obviously tonight we share a value in health. You wouldn't be here if you didn't value your health. And obviously you've now stayed on with me for an hour and a half. I'm going to wrap it up now soon. So, but yeah, I really do appreciate your time. So therefore, don't impose your values onto others. Actually encourage them to live a life of inspiration. So I found an area that I can now delegate to. There's Brad who loves social media. I don't like it. So there'll be someone that loves what you don't like, and therefore delegate it. And the more we do that, the more we have to work on inspirational work. The more we're in our inspired part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And that's what tonight's all about. Now, it would take me, even if a person came in, bursted into this room, yelled and yelled and yelled at me, because I'm such in a balanced state doing this, right? It would take a huge amount of anger, aggression to really start working me up. I would actually respond in a very composed way at this present point. But if I'm doing something I don't like doing and someone comes bursting in that room, I'm already at a point of imbalance and they're just sending me more out of balance. And so I'm going to respond with emotions. So you can see if you're doing what you love doing and you're poised and centered, it takes a lot to, you got a lot more resilience and you're not as triggered. This is, I guess, Brad, some tips to your earlier point is when you're living by your values, you'll be more balanced, centered, and composed. And those things will be they'll be more trivial. They won't be as, triggering to you. But look, I don't know exactly your circumstances, and I don't want to trivialize what you're going through. By all means, I don't want to do that. Certainly, so this next slide is all about, okay, how can you continue to live by your values? Well, then you just prioritize your day by your values. Now, if you're doing things like, just say you're setting up a side hustle and you're having to work 9 to 5 whilst you set up your side hustle, and your side hustle inspires you, then what you want to do is link your daily task at your paid job to how they're benefiting you in that side hustle. So for example, you might be doing some marketing in your paid job where you think, okay, if I do this well, I'm going to get better at mastering marketing, which will help me in my new side hustle. So it's actually linking what's important to you to what you're doing in your paid job, so that then you can see the benefit or the inspiration in doing that task. The inspiration's a better word. Again, when we start saying benefit and stuff, we start applying a subjective bias. But when we say something that inspires, so we've now found inspiration in our 9 to 5 job because it's linked to our highest values. And so you start doing this linkage where you can't delegate, or where you can't dump it, or where you can't say no. Okay, so I'm, I've probably got another 15 minutes. I don't know if you've got another 15 minutes in you, but let me see who's still here. Where are we? Okay, we've still got everyone. You're amazing. You certainly got a high value on health. Okay, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because a lot of this stuff now is probably not new to you. What I covered earlier is probably quite new to you. So certainly maintaining a sense of presence or being centered during the day. How we can do that, as I mentioned earlier, is living by what we value. And if we're doing something, a paid job that we're struggling to see how it serves us, then we need to start looking at ways in which it serves our highest values. And you'll find the linkages. If you look, you'll find them. I can guarantee it. I've mentioned that say no thank you when someone asks you to live by their values and it's not important to you. Square breathing is what balances our nervous system. So square breathing is the same inhale as the same exhale. So you can check your breathing throughout the day. If your inhale is longer than your exhale, it means that you're sympathetic dominant. It means that you're wired. You're essentially fight, flight, or freeze. You're in your amygdala. But if your breathing is like it's really centered, so your in-breath equals your out-breath, that means you've got balanced autonomics. You're completely centered. You're in that space of inspiration. If your out-breath is longer than your in-breath, then that's when your parasympathetic nervous system is activated. Again, that's good for rest and digest. So if you're struggling to digest your meal, then what you might want to do is start breathing and exaggerate your exhale, and that will get you into digesting your meal. So you can work this. So if you need to get out of bed in the morning, what you want to start doing is start taking some deep in breaths, okay? Start oxygenating the body, and that oxygenating the body will get the sympathetic working and will get you on your day quicker than, hitting the snooze button. So before you hit the snooze button, I suggest you start doing some deep inhales. So really breathe really deeply and long through your nose, and then expire really quickly. And then another big inhale and expire really quickly, and start oxygenate the body, and you'll find that you're alert. You'll find you could even go without your morning coffee if you do this breathing exercise. Again, these stress management techniques are really helpful for balancing the body, such as yoga, tai chi, walking in nature. Anything in nature is really helpful. These techniques, you can actually, you can Google these. So write them down. So The Third Space by Dr. Adam Fraser. So Dr. Adam Fraser, he studied the top tennis players and was working out why these top 10 tennis players were so much better than the rest of the field. They were just light years ahead of the field. And you'll probably notice that there's always like top 3, 4, 5, maybe tennis players that seem to be in a league of their own. And it's the same with any sport. You'll find that with rugby league, with rugby union, with soccer. There's always a few teams that are really in this an elite space. So he studied these high-performing people, and what he found was it wasn't necessarily their skill set, their agility, their strength, their ability to pass or kick a football. What he found was it was what they did in between points. So for tennis, like you'll see a tennis player, they'll start getting on top of a game and they'll keep on a roll or get on a roll. But the moment they get a setback and they focus on that setback, they start then going downhill. And you'll see it in football, for example. A team will score a goal, and then if they don't recompose themselves, the opposing team will score the goal back because they're unfocused. They're too jubilated, and they're too they're not present, essentially. Again, they've got a subjective bias. They've got more positives than negatives. They're not seeing that scoring a goal is a neutral event. It's just an event. Okay, so Dr. Adam Fraser said what he suggested was in between tasks. So like in between working and going home, what you want to do is do something that will switch you off your work. So for example, some people go to the gym on the way home from on the way to home from work, because that going to the gym is they just let go of their day. And essentially when they walk in the door and greet their family, they've got their mum or dad hat on and they're in a good state. There's nothing worse than carrying the stress from a previous meeting or interaction into the next one, because what you do, it's the same as if you're having interactions with work colleagues. If one work colleague has wound you up, if you don't neutralize that or blow it off somehow, then you take that charge into the next interaction, and then you'll get triggered, and then someone else will send you up, and then you'll just have this spiraling all day, this snowball effect where you go from one bad event to another bad event to another bad event to another bad event. And it's essentially because you have not allowed time between these different activities, or time to neutralize what has just happened, or time to take in was what has just happened. It's just essentially a pause. And so you could do some breathing exercises. You can, like in between Zoom meetings, it's not good to have back-to-back Zoom meetings, or not good to have back-to-back any type of meetings. You want to have a break so you can clear your mind and go into the new meeting with the right mindset. Again, this will be different to everyone as to how you shift that mindset. The Pomodoro principle is just another way to stay focused. And it's essentially chunking things down into smaller increments. So you're working for like nonstop, uninterrupted time for say 25, 30 minutes, and then you're having a short break. And then you're going another chunk of 25 to 30 minutes, and then having a short little break. of about 5 minutes. And so you're essentially chunking it down where you have uninterrupted time. Uninterrupted time is the phone off. You have a do not disturb sign on your door, and you are purely focused on that one activity for that 25 minutes. Then you get up, then you can check your messages and whatever. But yeah, you're doing uninterrupted workflow essentially, and really centered and focused workflow. The Zeigarnik effect, he was a Russian psychologist, and what he worked out was that things will continue to play on your mind if you leave them open. So if you leave a conversation where it had no closure and it was just sort of left open-ended, then that will play on your mind, and you will constantly be replaying that conversation and thinking, did they interpret me right? I didn't quite check. I wonder if they got a right interpretation or a wrong. I don't know what they got. But so essentially, the Zeigarnik effect is closing things out so that they don't keep playing on your mind. So at the end of the day, what you want to do is have a checklist, is saying, like, essentially, okay, I've answered all my emails, or all the important ones, the ones I wanted to answer, done. That's all done. So now I don't need to think about emails when I get home. I've returned the phone calls that I really wanted to return, and I've written down on paper the ones I didn't return. I'm going to do that tomorrow. So essentially, you're closing the day so that when you get home, you're in a resourceful state to be in a relaxing mode, winding down. So the Zeigarnik effect is essentially, well, what he discovered was if we keep things open, we remember them. So he was encouraging things to stay open. But if you don't want things playing on your mind, then you want to put closure to them. You want to tick them off. I'm not going to go into detail of this because this is sleep, and again, it's sleep hygiene. Some of these things you might be already doing, and I've shared a lot of what is going to help a good night's sleep. So that previous slide about those 3 techniques, that will help you get a good night's sleep, because you're putting closure to the day. You're putting like you're writing down things that you need to do tomorrow. There's nothing that's going to continue to play in your mind. Obviously, if you dissolved any resentment, that won't be playing on your mind when you go to bed. You won't be thinking, oh, I hope I don't see that work colleague tomorrow. Oh, they make me so angry. That's the things you want to dissolve, so that when you lie in bed, they're not popping into your mind, okay? Or you don't want to be lying in bed infatuating over that boy or girl that you're desiring so badly that you can't sleep because you just only see the upside. Again, you want to be dissolving them so that you can just rest at ease, and because you see them for the whole being as opposed to only half of them. Okay, so creating these physical boundaries. I've got a little, what I might do is share these slides with you so that you can go through them, but it's essentially, I've got a little nightly routine. Again, it's finding what works for you. This works for some people, works for me, but not necessarily going to work for everyone. So it's finding things that wind you down, that relax you, and doing that well before you actually want to go to bed. So essentially, we want to start changing the lighting. We want to start minimizing the lights as we, like around 2 hours before bed, because then the melatonin gets produced. And the reason why I'm sharing like a nightly routine is that at night is where our brain detoxes. Okay. So all the toxins, the waste products, are then excreted out of our brain. It's essentially a flush of the brain. It's where we start developing strong neural pathways. So if you've learned something tonight, for example, if you get a good night's sleep tonight, you will retain more of this presentation tomorrow than if you have a poor night's sleep. So that's why I'm sharing this about sleep. So thank you, Amy, for your feedback. I appreciate it. If you have to go, I totally understand. I've gone so over. But I hope you've got some value. And look, the thing about being healthy or living a healthy life, that's probably a better way of putting it, is that we want to be doing it consistently and not in chunks. So this is, again, the amygdala gets us swinging. Like, yes, we do exercise for a week, we're great, and then we do none for a week, and then our amygdala is swinging back and forth. Okay, it's all or nothing, all or nothing. What we want to be doing is consistency. So here again is like, exercise is great in the morning because it gets our sympathetic nervous system, it gets our oxygen into the body, it lifts us, it really gets us lifted for the day. So we're ready for the day. We can certainly, thank you, Mohit. That's all right. You hop onto another meeting. As I said, I'm recording this. I'm going to share the recording. So thanks for attending. I really appreciate it. We're wrapping up here, everyone. So thanks for sticking along for the marathon. So essentially, like, I've just given some ideas of how you can sprinkle holistic health in your day to keep yourself centered. So if you're exercising in the morning, that's really good for centering the nervous system. Same with walking in nature at lunchtime. So you're getting your nature fix. Nature is very calming to the nervous system. It helps it find its center. Again, it's all about finding homeostasis, balance. That's what we've talked about all night, is balance, neutralization, getting that poise, that state of centeredness, that state of rational objectiveness, the state of non-judgment. Okay, afternoon, evening's a great time to doing breathing exercises, meditation, these sort of relaxing, more calming, because it's okay to wind up in the morning because obviously we've got tasks, we're busy, you know, it's where we achieving and doing, but in the evening is where we're unwinding, we're allowing the body to heal and repair. This is some simple nutritional tips. Again, I've got it, again, really simple, but again, nutrition is simple. It's not complicated. It's just that I think we perceive it to be complicated because we judge food. Okay, if we don't judge food and we see it for what it is and see whether it's taking us towards our highest values or away from them, then we, can make decisions accordingly. You want to make decisions based on your highest values. Is it taking you towards your highest values, or is it taking you away? So, for example, my health is one of my highest values. I look at that hamburger, I see it as a hamburger. I'm not labeling it good or bad. I'm just thinking, will that hamburger take me towards my highest value of being my optimal, healthier self? I could think of better ways or better fuel to do that. So I look for other options. And I don't judge a hamburger. A hamburger is a hamburger. And it can serve its purpose in the right context for the right people, depending on what their values are and depending on the environment that they're making the decision in. So, like, for example, like, some people need to gain weight for a competition. They need to put weight on. Well, a hamburger's going to take them towards that value of gaining weight for whatever they inspire to achieve. Again, it's just a hamburger. So really, eating seasonal foods, local is obviously highest in its nutrient value. Organic, it's obvious more cleaner where possible. Otherwise, eat via the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, which you can Google Dirty Dozen Clean 15. So that's the cleanest foods that you can buy conventionally, and then the dirtiest foods which you want to buy organic. Whole foods, wide variety is key. So going for the rainbow, eating a variety of foods, a variety of grains, a variety of vegetables, a variety of fruits, all seasonal, local. Planning is fundamental to fueling your body. So, as you know, piss poor preparation leads to, I know, what is it? Is it lack of planning leads to piss poor performance or something like that? It's, but anyway, so planning is fundamental around if you're looking for the right fuel to fuel your inspiration or to fuel your body so that you can live your inspiration. And certainly planning, putting aside time, investing time into making sure that you've got the right foods in the house so that you're ready and can fuel yourself when appropriately. Timing when to eat is really important. So you want to be consuming your calories, most of your calories at the start of the day and less at the end of the day. Really simple. And that's simple science. Essentially, we don't need calories, a large amount of calories at the end of the day. We're sleeping. We need our calories during the day. So one of the biggest encouragements I can give if you're struggling to maintain weight or achieve the weight that you want is just manage when you're eating your calories is real, and eating slowly. So chewing your food, they're probably the two greatest tips I can give you in terms of eating slower. You'll end up eating less. And if you eat your calories so that they're weighted towards the start and the middle of the day and not at the end of the day, that will also serve you very well. Okay, this is it. The last slide. Woohoo! You've made it. Thank you so much for enduring this long marathon. We've nearly clocked 2 hours together. Brain food. So I've listed some brain foods here. Again, I'm going to share the slides. So certainly you can take a screenshot if you want, or I'll send the slides to you. But these are the foods that really support good brain health. And there's evidence base behind all these macronutrients and micronutrients. So the top is amino acids, essentially. So amino acids come from protein. So you need to make sure you've got adequate protein in your diet. Omega-3s essentially come from oily fish, walnuts, chia seeds, linseeds. So make sure you've got, oily fish in your diet, or you're eating seeds and nuts is really important, or you're having a good amount of olive oil or hemp seed oil or grapeseed oil. B vitamins, you get them from your whole foods, your nuts, grains, and seeds. So really important that you don't eliminate grains, or unless you have an allergy to them, but unnecessarily, just eliminating food groups creates nutritional deficiencies. So the best diet is non-diet, no diet. It's just finding a balance with what you eat is what it's about. Magnesium, your leafy greens. So anything green contains magnesium. So making sure you're consuming green content, green material. Zinc will come from your nuts, seeds, your meat, oysters, and vitamin D you'll get from dairy, oily fish, and some small amount of sun exposure. You don't want to overdo sun exposure because it's too much radiation. Okay, so here's my linked, so if you take a screenshot, not a screenshot, but wave your camera in front of this slide, you'll pick up a link to my podcast where I've got continual education. So if you want to hear more from me or more from other health experts, I've interviewed over 100 health experts on my podcast. I've got over 150 episodes. So there's a wealth of knowledge in all aspects: mental health, physical health, emotional health, relationships, you name it, anything to do with health, it's on the Me and My Health Up podcast. Next slide is my free discovery session. So again, wave your camera up to this. I'll also send these links via email if you haven't got a phone, or if you're on your phone, you can't do this. So this is a free discovery session. If you'd like to chat with me in terms of getting some further support about what we've spoken about tonight, about neutralizing charges, these emotional baggage. If you want further support, if you want to join me for that retreat where I'm actually doing a full day on this, dissolving this emotional baggage, we actually workshop it. We've got a workbook. You work through the workbook. Certainly just reach out to me. This is my email address. Let me know you're interested in the retreat. I'll then send you details of when it is, where it's at, and what's involved in terms of the key learning outcomes, what sort of things you'll be doing, the costs associated with it. And happy to obviously do this session with you and answer any further questions you may have, and hopefully provide some additional support. So thank you so much for, you can also follow me on my socials. So Brad, I know you're into social media. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Yes, I'm there dancing on TikTok. I do health dances. But yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Philip. And yes, I will email you the details, Philip. So thank you for that. Really appreciate you staying and everyone staying on. It's great to have company whilst I talk about what I love talking about. So thanks again. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes.